Flashback, Episode 13. Never let a crisis go to waste. We had finished hearing Sarah's bleak overview of the state of America and of New York City of Dis. Indeed, between the pandemic, the lockdowns, protesters against and for vaccinations, protesters demanding equity and reparations, and extremist groups and agitators, from the political left and the right alike, things were a mess. Sarah snarked, "Like I've heard said, never let a crisis go to waste. We can use the crowds and the chaos to our advantage. Although I hope we can stay clear of all this nonsense and just focus on our mission." She lamented, "I am not confident that exposure and conflict can be avoided, despite blending into crowds to hide in a dense city. It will be hard to avoid the crowds, with so many activists and protesters everywhere." Sarah continued, "In fact, we should plan to use the crowds and their chaos to our advantage and try not to stand out." She posited, "With so much scrutiny on the crowds, and thusly not on individuals, we may be able to travel much more freely." She smiled. "We can travel incognito, freely, just as we are. We should not stand out or be noticed at all. We will be able to travel, I believe, without detection, lost in the crowds and the chaos all around." Taylor looked to everyone and cautioned, "Traveling freely does not mean traveling carefree." She warned, "Always pay attention. Remember, when we talk about SIPDE, do you remember SIPDE? SIPDE. That was an acronym for Scan, Identify, Predict, Decide, and Execute." Taylor emphasized, "One missed threat could be the end of us all." Sarah nodded, acknowledging Taylor's caution. She smiled. "Regarding unreliable communications, the cell towers operate intermittently, off and on, making phone calls, texting, and internet all unpredictable, all flaky. Often cell towers are offline for days. Rarely they are down for good, becoming functionally, outright, permanently dead." Sarah grinned, "Dead for everyone else, but not dead for us." She said, "Our communications will be reliable. We will have reliable communication because we have long-range, ruggedized, military-style walkie-talkie radios with 5-mile range that connect to our comms watches. We also have satellite phones, which we will use to replace our normal cell phones because they will be unreliable due to the intermittent inoperable cell towers. But SAT or satellite phones will work 100% of the time as long as we have view of the sky. Our comms watches, though, communicate through both the SAT phone and the walkie-talkie radio. So we will have communications anywhere in the world, outdoors and indoors within 5 miles of each other." Sarah closed, "That's it. Until we learn more, we're operating blind in the dark." She seemed uneasy and then said, "We just have to pray for the angels to guide us to where the crown of Baal is and to which Soros property harbors it." With Sarah's grand speech done, we all just nodded in agreement. I joined in after Sarah's dissertation. I said, okay, this is our first day of scoping out and assessing Soros's homes. His penthouses, his mansions, his compounds, and I guess you could call them fortresses. Soros has homes in all 5 New York boroughs. And he has a major fortress-like compound in upstate New York. I suggested to the team, my bet is the devil's soul-draining crown of Baal is in either Soros's Manhattan penthouse, due to its wealth and security, or in his upstate New York compound fortress, because that compound is so huge and isolated, it would be the only place Soros has in New York that could truly be protected like a fortress, without scrutiny or threat of wanderbys. So I concluded, but that said, the crown is small. It can literally be in any of his lairs. We assigned teams to scope out Soros's lairs, to scope out his penthouses, estates, and compound. Sarah and Bob paired up to assess the major upstate New York Soros compound. I imagined Sarah was likely right. Something important, like the soul-draining crown of Baal, was likely to be in a major protected rural compound, like Soros had in upstate New York. Taylor, Katie, and I paired up to assess Soros's Manhattan penthouse. If the crown of Baal was not in Soros's rural fortress compound, then I believed it would likely be somewhere in his penthouse in Manhattan. I concluded our top and thusly our first Soros target should be his upstate compound fortress and his Manhattan penthouse. Everyone acknowledged with our very familiar hoo-ah! Heard, understood, acknowledged. Hoo-ah! The caretaker husband, an elderly man with medium-length gray hair and a bushy mustache, and sporting a large, old-school, wire-framed pair of glasses, and down-to-earth, worker, button shirt, brown pants. Well, he drove us in his old-school, big sedan to the train station. We were armed with our knives and pistols, concealed, of course. Taylor, Katie, and we all took the train from Riverdale to where we could use the New York subway system. Soros was said to have a few residences throughout the different boroughs of New York City. We had a lot to check out. Sarah and Bob took the train from Riverdale to upstate New York, where Soros apparently had his largest estate, a fortress compound estate. It was in a very secluded, remote, very rural, private area that was surrounded by dense forest trees and treetop canopies. The fortress was nestled in a big clearing at the forest center with a moat of trees on all sides. Although Sarah and Bob had only one target, it was far away, and it was potentially a major compound of unknown security and defenses, and maybe it was the home to the devil's soul-draining crown of Baal.